And in Islam, we should never want to control another human being, because then you are infringing on their ubudiyah. You're infringing upon their servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We want to leave people to be free so that they can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on their own. But the moment you start to kind of control, even with our children, the more you start to try to control, you are infringing on their ability to be sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because now they start to do things for you and not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is why when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw that his wives wanted to make i'tikaf, they were competing with one another to make i'tikaf in the masjid. You guys remember that hadith? Hafsa asked permission to the Prophet ﷺ to pitch a tent in the masjid because she wanted to perform i'tikaf. And then Zainab, she wanted to pitch a tent because she wanted to perform i'tikaf. And then Aisha pitched the tent because she wants to perform i'tikaf. The Prophet ﷺ wakes up in the morning for Salatul Fajr and sees all of these tents in the masjid. And he said, who does these tents belong to? And the Sahaba said, those tents belong to your wives. They're competing with one another to be in a masjid with you. And the Prophet ﷺ called all of his wives over. And he said, Allah turidna? Are you doing this for Allah? Or are you doing this for me? Are you doing this for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or are you doing this for me? And he said, you know what? I'm not even performing i'tikaf anymore. And he took his stuff and he left. He didn't even perform i'tikaf. Why? Because I don't want to be the sabab. I don't want to be the reason that you are doing something. You do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for the sake of another human being. I don't want any parts of that, because now you're doing things for me, for my sake, for my pleasure. And now I'm interfering with your ubudiyah. I'm interfering with your servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't want to be a part of that. So he took his things and he left the masjid, and he abandoned an act of worship that he enjoyed doing, and that was performing i'tikaf in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. Can you imagine? The Prophet ﷺ would give up an act of worship that he enjoyed doing simply because he feared that he was being the reason that his wives were engaging in a certain act of worship. I don't want to be a part of that. So we don't ever want to control somebody else's behavior. That is something that as a Muslim, we should stay far away from. Yes, we want to set boundaries so that people understand the boundaries, but we don't want to control somebody's behavior. We want people to be free to either disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and deal with the consequences, or obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get the reward. I want you to be free to do that. However, I can clarify, I can explain, I can give you advice, I can give you admonition, but the choice is yours. As Allah tells us in the Quran, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Let those who want to believe, believe, and let those of you who want to disbelieve, let you disbelieve. If that's what you choose to do. If that's what you choose to do. But I don't want to control your behavior.